Welcome to the Women's School. My name is January Donovan, founder of the Women's School, where we do practical life training on how to be a woman for such a time of moral decay and confusion. Today, I'm breaking down a video from Emily King, which I really appreciate her insight and I think her wisdom, especially for a lot of the single women out there. I haven't listened to everything that she's saying, but I want to break this down on her insights on why men are lonely today. And this goes for married men, for single men, for divorced men, and just kind of harvest wisdom. And I'll put in my take on her thoughts, which I think are in some degree, I'm building upon, I think, her insight on this. So here we go. Let's begin.
Today, we are talking about the loneliness epidemic for men. This has been talked about a lot, especially on social media. So, I want to talk about the real reasons why guys are lonely today because we've heard a lot of opinions, especially on TikTok. And I've come across so many stitches where women are just saying that it's because it's the consequences that men are facing for treating women poorly. First of all, I don't believe this, but this demonstrates the mindset of women believing that they are a man's everything or that they should be a man's everything. And I just think that it's interesting that a lot of women are saying that men just need to learn how to be more emotionally available and adapt and be able to be vulnerable and open up about their emotions and feelings. But
Okay. So, first, the reaction always points to a blame. What can men do more of? Why aren't men this? It's because men are this, as opposed to what's my responsibility as a woman to do my part to actually contribute to men. And we have created a culture of blaming and shaming, and really kind of a culture where the last thing we do, if we ever do it, is look from within and say, wait a minute, what's my responsibility here? Or where have I been irresponsible as a woman? And I think this is a fruit of almost a radical feminism agenda to emasculate men, whether it was intentional. I think there was some degree of intentionality, but the trickle effect of it is now peppered all throughout our culture that we don't almost understand why we do the things we do. We just jump into this reaction of why men are this and the reason why men are lonely without even asking ourselves, well, how have I contributed to that loneliness? What's my role in this? And is that really accurate? Okay, let's continue.
I don't think it's that simple. I don't think that it falls all on men's laps as far as the resolution. So today we are going over the 5 real reasons why men are lonely and suffering in this loneliness epidemic. Before we get started, guys, please remember to like the video and please comment if you agree or disagree with any of what I say. Number
As you continue, she just reminded me, if you like what we're saying here and what we're talking about, processing, please like our video and subscribe, and also share with me your thoughts and insights. And I'd love to have a dialogue on really the vision here for us is how do we create practical life training so that we can move into a solution and not just complain about what's not there and what rather uh, find actually uh, a way to move forward and find the beauty of complementing together as women based on mindset and skill set training. So let's continue.
one, the first point I want to make is that both genders are in this loneliness epidemic. I think it's very interesting how this has been pushed all on men. I do think that it has impacted men more, and that is because of the other reasons that we'll go through. But ladies, it's not just a problem for men. It's literally happening to both men and women. And the reason for that takes us into number 2. Reason number 2 is that there's been
Okay. So if you don't know, but this new study just came out by a few years ago that loneliness is now an international epidemic, which means that yes, it goes across both genders. And also, I think that the way we embody loneliness is different for both men and women. Loneliness could be numbing, right? And it could be also that we bury ourselves, men bury themselves in sports, women could bury themselves in shopping or Netflix. Whatever it is, it just looks different for both men and women. But I do agree that it is an international epidemic. And it's kind of, it really is a worthy question for us to ask. Why is it in a hyper connected social media world, are we lonely? I mean, Is there something, which I'm going to talk about shortly, that is the deeper cause of men and women's loneliness? Is it possible that we are missing a huge elephant in the room of why men and women are lonely? Okay, let's proceed.
Less real in person socializing ever since COVID. And the difference here that this highlights is between men and women. Women will stay in contact and just call their female friends and catch up with them. Whereas men don't typically do that. They don't reach out with a phone call and talk on the phone for 20 minutes to their best guy friend.
Okay, that is accurate that women can just call and men are not so apt to just picking up a phone call. However, I think the bigger issue is that there's no training on how to actually have real deep connection. So even though a woman is actually picking up the phone call and talking to a girlfriend, she could spend 2 hours on the phone and not feel fulfilled or nourished in our conversation, which leads her to the same place where she was in, lonely. The same thing with men is that we're not taught to communicate in layers of depth that fulfills our need actually to feel satisfied in a relationship and connected in a very emotional, mental, physical level, that it's not a matter of space and time, it's a matter of depth and meaning. And I think it's a revolutionary model, but it's actually not really complicated. The loneliness issue that we are experiencing is because there's no training on friendship, how to ask meaningful questions, how to listen, how to empathize, how to engage, how to look people in the eye, how to make people feel important, how to actually compliment people. So what you're seeing is a lot of time wasted talking for women, but not deepening, which there is a hunger for depth and meaning in our life. So the question that we need to, as a society, ask, is there a training that we should and ought to incorporate in our school systems that actually helps them develop deeper connection? Because it doesn't matter how much math you have, what school you go to, or you know, you're an A student, if you are suffering layers and layers of loneliness because you are robbed of the skill set and the mindset necessary to actually be a friend and know how to connect in conversation skills. I mean, it's so crucial that our young, girls and boys are taught to communicate effectively so that they don't become susceptible to toxic ideologies. Because when a child is lonely, then she is susceptible to what? Propaganda and toxic ideologies. Because when you're lonely, you want to belong somewhere. Right. And so the purpose of us wanting to connect in deeper friendship is that we feel like we belong. Now, how many girls and boys are talking or spending a lot of time in sports, golf, whatever, but they don't actually feel like they belong? There's a lot of comparison and competition, there's a lot of catty talk. I'm glad we can talk about the hair, but really not talking about dreams and depth and meaning and ideas and hard things. And this is something that I think we ought to reintroduce. Now, I was an immigrant. I didn't see my parents left when I was 7 years old from the Philippines, so that they could actually get a legal visa here in the United States. So from a very young age, I didn't have sort of a sense of parents and a home. I lived with my aunt, uncle, and my brothers and my sister, which I was so grateful for. But what that did, what it brought a level of suffering and sadness in my life that made me lean closer to friendships in the Philippines. I remember being in second and first grade, and my girlfriends asking me, "Hey, um, what's hard? Is there anything that I can do? Can I help you? Um, what's it like to have your parents leave?" I mean, this is like an 8 year old, a 7 year old. And if you think about a 7 year old and 8 year old right now, we are providing so much comfort, void of suffering and challenging, that almost they don't know how to have difficult conversation. And, even though that was a challenging time in my life, I am so grateful for the level of friendship and depth that I was able to experience at first and second and third grade. And I think that was just a fruit of the culture in the Philippines, to be honest. And that was, almost 30, 40 years ago. I'm now 44. So I'm not saying it's the same. The world has dramatically shifted, especially with the phones. And what I'm saying is that, especially with the phones and the loss of infrastructure in our family setting where we used to live close to our aunts and uncles, we have to double down on effective communication skill, because now what we have are lonely men and women. It's not exclusive to men. Women are lonely, and it's an international epidemic. And when we have a culture that is blaming men and blaming women for this loneliness, what we have is that men blame women, women blame men, and it goes nowhere. What we need to do is to go to the source of the crisis, which is we lack effective communication skills that actually nourish our need for deep belonging connection because we've not been shown how, but we are blamed and shamed for it. And I would say suffering unnecessarily for it, suffering with lives of quiet loneliness. Okay, let's proceed.
Men will typically bond and maintain friendships by spending
Mm.
time together and actually doing something side by side. It's also why guys won't usually just have their guy friends over to the house to hang out unless they're like doing something, they're watching a game. Otherwise, they're leaving the house and they're going golfing or they're going biking or they're doing some project outside the house.
Okay, I'm going to point out another reason why maybe men want to escape from their home is because their home isn't a haven for them. Now, this doesn't probably feel good to some of you women sitting out there, but we have also been conditioned to believe that we should not be good cooks, we should not take care of our homes, we should sort of eradicate this idea that women should be masters of their feminine, genius at home because that would take us back to 1950s. But the truth is that what we're doing is that we are repelling men outside of our home. What do I mean by that? I think that if we do a better job making our house a home, a beautiful experience, make it an artistry where we as women pay attention to the details of nurturing our family, our home, and pay attention. Now, I am not suggesting that you bypass your call outside your home. I built a company, and I work at home. I mean, we've built an infrastructure where I am able to prioritize my home life, and it is not a walk in the park. It requires a level of layers and layers of discipline to be able to say, I need to do both, and I need to do it well, and I need to understand the priority. What I am saying is that we need that new kind of woman that's going to actually do both and do it with a sense of reverence. And the idea that we need to make our home a place of a haven is more important than ever because right now our children, including our husbands, um, are being tempted all day long outside of the home with toxic ideologies, with pornography, with things that are just not really good for our marriage. And is it our responsibility to just, kind of like, oh, make our house a home so that I can make it, so I can make sure my husband wants to come home and that's my responsibility? That's not what I am suggesting. What I am suggesting is that women do their part to make our homes so inspiring. It tastes good. The food tastes good. Your husband will say, you know what? Come home because my wife makes a good steak, a good chili. And, we can go out for a little bit. But then the husband says, I love going out, but I just love being home with you. It's clean. It smells good. It's organized. Yes, it's that idea that we have to have our home ordered. Absolutely. That our children are disciplined. Does that fall on our all alone on a woman's responsibility? No, that is not what I'm suggesting. My parent, my husband and I definitely co-parent, but what I am suggesting is that there's a new woman that is not afraid to lead her home, that's not afraid to say, no, this is my throne, and I love my king, my husband, to feel like he belongs here. This is a beautiful haven for him, and yes, he might want to go out, but boy, does he look forward to coming home to me because it is a place that nurtures him and he feels alive, loved, in a king in my house. And that is the kind of woman that we need. And yes, do we need to train to be her? Yes. Too many complaining about who's, women are doing this, women are not doing this. We need to train as women to be stronger than we think we are because we have weakened the woman so much. Think about our grandmothers. Think about the way they used to have such sense of reverence and pride for their own home. We need to go back to that woman, not that we then just be that woman and that's it. No, but so much more. But the question is how? How do we then have a work-life integration? And I think that's where skill and mindset training really comes in. I believe it's possible. I believe it's necessary because women should not be voiceless. We need to have contribution in our home and outside our home and both in different seasons of our life. And everyone is called to different things. Every woman, has a unique and irreplaceable call in society. But regardless, we have a duty to bring reverence back to our environment. And it begins with our home. And that way we create an atmosphere where our children want to be home. And so does our husband.
or they're fixing up a car together. Whatever it is, men are typically doing things, and that is how they bond. Now, ever since COVID, there's been less opportunity for that, right? Because there had to be that social distancing. And that's when a lot of men got out of the routine of spending time together. A lot of men are also not going in person to work anymore. They're working from home, which really decreases their social life. Number three.
Okay, that is accurate, is that we have had to pivot our way of life in the last 3 years because of COVID. However, the mindset is that life is happening for me, not to me. What it means is that we can continue to blame COVID, or we can say, you know what? We have to pivot our solution. We actually have to skill up and say, now that I can't, because we have to social distance, maybe I need to, you know, create a new strategy and solution to also work on what my own needs are for friendship, for community, and you can get really creative. We don't have to be a victim to the circumstances around us. We can rise above it because we can't control the circumstances of life. And no, I'm not, I don't, I think COVID was a massive, I, I'm hesitating, a massive shift in the way we lived our life. But as women, we can say, okay, this is where we are. How can we pivot? And how can we make good? How can we make a lemon out of lemonade? I always butcher those things because I'm Filipino and I see things the wrong way. But my point is, let's let's be women who are not men and women was not afraid to say, well, I'm not a victim of my circumstance just because that doesn't mean I can't find a new way to actually, communicate my needs for deeper connection, right? And strategize because we've got to stop this victim mentality. It's ruining our culture.
Three is that men are going through a big transition right now from learning and living through toxic masculinity to healthy vulnerability. And this is where women can honestly give a lot.
Okay. So I think that we have to take ownership as women, whether we were intentional about it or not, to say, you know what, we've gone a little bit too far, that feminism has become, I want to eradicate men. Maybe that's not what we're saying, but subconsciously, it's the way culture has sort of created a belief system. When we have TV shows that depict, kind of this STUPID kind of man and a dominant, strong woman, and almost incapable of the tenderness and emotion. I do think that we are entering, this age of a new woman where she is strong enough to hold her own and hold her standard and wants her freedom, but she's not doing it out of venge or revenge of men. She's doing it because she believes that it's actually a way to respect men. She's not usurping men. She doesn't have to dethrone herself anymore. And I think this, we always see kind of two radical extremes, right? Where no freedom, no right to, I can do whatever I want, both of which are not making women happy. We have data that tells us that 100 years ago, women are not any happier than they are today now, at least in the Western world where we have freedom. And here's the distinction, is that having freedom does not equal being free, because we know that women are sicker, unhealthier, they're not happier in their marriage, they're unhappy with their life, they don't like who they are, their family life is more chaotic, there's more depression, more anxiety, more stress, and overwhelm. We have enough data to tell us that, you know what, it's actually not working and that we have to actually correct our infrastructure. And this is where also men are saying, you know what, I felt sort of the responsibility of maybe centuries of perhaps how the way men were and the way they treated women, but I can also correct my ability to say I don't have to. I can push back against this toxic masculinity, but I can also own my emotion. I can also have the level of tenderness and firmness, and that makes me strong and not weak.
Lot more grace because women should be accepting and highly avoidable to shaming men for their feelings. And from what I have seen and heard, is that a lot of women are not doing a good job at this. And
Yes, I don't think that we are doing a good job training our women how to honor men. And I think partly because we don't actually know how to honor ourselves. I think it's born out of an insecurity because we don't like who we are, because we've never been trained how to be a woman. So what we do is that we deflect and we blame men for the things that we can't have because we don't know how to get what we want. And I think that needs to change. And it's not one or the other. We both have an equal responsibility as men and women to be responsible, be hardworking, be, I would say, honest, and not blame and shame and go out into social media. I mean, I I I look at sometimes social media and the things that come out of both men and women's mouth are so vile that I thought, what happened to self-respect? Do men and women know that the things that come out of their mouth is a reflection of who they are and who they're not? And we live in a world that's fast, busy. Nobody's thinking about what they're thinking anymore. And they're probably not thinking, oh, I wonder what that says about who I am. But we need to start introducing that at a very young age so that my 7-year-old daughter, I have 8 children, can think about what they're thinking and think that their actions and the way they're showing up has ripple consequence. When I have my teenagers and the way he's talking to his 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and I'm always inviting him to draw both strength and tenderness as a leader in our house, I have to bring awareness that, his tonality matters. And everything that comes out in his mouth, he is responsible for. Stop this idea of blaming and shaming. And there's a part of this idea that we are almost afraid for men to man up. Why? Because we're afraid that it weakens a man. Well, I think men want to be men, just as women want to be strong women.
And that men are getting shamed, or women are at least telling them after their man has cried in front of them that they feel differently now. They're not seeing him in the same light. They see him differently just because he expressed an emotion that was other than anger. So this is very, very difficult for men to move forward into another relationship and to be able to express themselves emotionally like that without feeling like the same thing is going to happen. I just think that women need to be more understanding of this.
I definitely agree that women need to be understanding. I also think that we need, as a culture, training on how to divulge our emotion. It's not, it's not just I'm going to cry whenever I have a chance to because I feel like it and I'm just going to bleed my pain to the internet so everybody can hear. No, there is a time, a right time. We have to discern it. We have to think about it. We have to make a decision. And it's not this free fall of like, just because I feel like it, I'm just going to cry and I'm just going to act. And I think that's a case by case situation because I'm not suggesting that men don't cry. I'm suggesting that we are over emotionalizing our culture where feelings have become the basis of decision making, and also based on our status that we have weakened both the men and women because we have no sense of command of our emotion. Because I can't just act on everything how I feel. It's just I have children. I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I have to teach them to own how they feel while simultaneously being hyper aware that they can indeed not be a victim of their own emotion. In my home, it's this mind over emotion. Mind over emotion. That's what my children do as a mnemonic to help them remember that they are in control of their emotion, that they can control their emotion.
Women definitely shouldn't deny that it happens because it happens. Like if you have a man standing in front of you telling you that this legit happened to him, you can't deny it. The other aspect of this that I see, especially with the red pill community, is that other men will hear these stories or they've gone through the experiences themselves and then they'll tell other men to also not express their feelings. Like, don't make this mistake, men, because this is what happened to me.
Okay, there's two skills there. Number one is that we need to know how to also, as a skill set, not divulge information that's not necessary, I'm sorry, not know how to receive a man's emotion as a skill, know how to reel them in and nurture them, know how to communicate shame. And that requires tonality, that requires the right words, that requires body language, because it's different than like, oh yeah, you feel that way? Cool. Or, tell me more. Is there anything that I can do to, I'm sorry that you felt that. And also protecting our men. protecting them and not divulging their emotion. There's a sense of a sacredness that we are entrusted when they share their feelings. When my children share their feelings with me, I can't just divulge their feelings to other moms because I feel like I can talk about it. No, I have to have respect for how they feel and treat them with that level of reverence and respect in front of them and also behind them.
And so it spreads this terrible messaging. I think that it is women's responsibility to be able to handle a man's emotions, especially when she's been saying that that's what she wants.
Okay, so it is women's responsibility, but the question is, are women trained to know how to receive that responsibility? We're always told what to do, but never how to do it. And that's really one reason why we started the women's school is how do you accept responsibility? How do you train a woman to actually receive that level of um, training where she knows how to receive a man's emotion, but also training men to know also how to communicate effectively to their fellow peers. Because what we have right now, also men, the way they talk about other women is not respectful and it is a reflection of who they are. But I always go back to have they been trained how? Because we can't assume that just because they're men, they're dogs, and that they're just going to do that. They're just going to speak about women and they're going to make fun of women or they're going to talk about lustful things. No, women can have command, men can have command of their tongue. They need to be trained how to do that. I have a 16-year-old boy, and I have to, and my husband, and I have to be intentionally training him and bringing awareness, but also scripting, knowing, teaching him what to say, bringing awareness to his habits and behaviors, how to talk to people. I mean, yes, there is a lot of work, for a woman and a man together collaboratively to raise a man and raise a woman someday.
Right? Women want men that are more vulnerable, that are more emotionally there and willing to express other emotions than anger. Well, ladies, you can't mess up when they do it, right? You can't shame them. It's a very important point at which
I'm going to point something that's very important. My husband and I have this conversation because we want a guy to be emotionally available for us that can connect with us. But we also want a guy to be strong enough to protect us. And let me give you an example. I obviously, do work online, and when there's critics that are hard for me and burdens my heart because it does, don't the people what we say hurt people, and we have to stop this idea that there's no bearing on our words. And I need my husband to be strong for me. And I don't want him to be like, oh, I'm going to cry with you. Yes, I want you to empathize with me and say, that hurts. Ah, but I want you to be like, listen, I am here for you. This angers me. I want my husband's strength. So let's be careful when we say we want our husband to be so vulnerable and make sure they're in touch with their emotion, because we also want that side of them that also has command of their emotion, that numbs a part of that emotion so that they can act accordingly when it's necessary. Because sometimes, when you go to war, right? And it could be, let's just say physical war, men have to silence part of their emotion. Why? Because it is so toxic. I mean, they have to do their job. Otherwise, they can't do their job if they're just constantly crying about their emotion being vulnerable. Now, it looks different. I'm just kind of giving you a flash here, but it's important that we don't negate the reality that the same vulnerability that we want from men is also could be in conflict with the same strength that we want from them. So we as women need to know, we as a woman need to have the skill to create those distinctions and not silence their own strength and their ability to actually sacrifice how they feel to do what is noble and right when you need them to be. Because sometimes I don't really want my husband to cry with me. I want my husband to empathize with me and have enough strength to fight for me when I have nothing, I have no energy to fight.
it can really impact a man's ability to do that into the future with you or with any other woman. Number 4, there's been so many changes within a family dynamic of gender roles. So back 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, it was very clear what was expected of men versus women. But today is very different in that there's no real set guidelines. There's still some relationships that will follow traditional gender roles, but I think a lot of them, a majority of them, are transitioning away from that. which means that men and women actually have to discuss in detail everything about a family dynamic, which is it's actually harder than just going into it knowing or assuming, because if you go into it assuming nowadays, it's probably going to be wrong, and you could create many difficult moments, many arguments.
Okay, so the reason I think, in my opinion, it's so hard to now kind of have those gender roles is because most of us at home don't get the training that we need to actually take responsibility on our who we are as both a man and a woman. I don't even think it's just, oh, men take the trash out. I think there is an entitlement or lack of discipline in our home life that we're arguing about doing the dishes because we actually don't know how to do the dishes fast and efficiently, and it breaks our heart to do the dishes. Or we're arguing about taking the trash out because we think it should be a man's job, but really the reality is that we don't want to do it because we've been conditioned to actually not be responsible, or maybe, I hate to say, be lazy about it. And I think that we have a culture that is permeating that laziness mentality. Now, this is not to blame and shame sort of a generation, and this is not to say every person is like that. What I am saying is that when the world is easier, microwave, accessible, it's a lot harder to actually develop layers and layers of discipline. And I say that to you as a mom of teenagers, where I am constantly trying to sell my children on hard work, on work that's going above and beyond, where I'm asking them, don't wait for me to ask you what to do. I want you to pay attention to your environment. So we just live in a different culture where we are undertrained. We are undertrained because of the infrastructure, but also mothers have been undertrained in a sort of this world that has become the world wide web. Therefore, they can't give the training that they actually haven't received for themselves. Training on, saying no to social media, as opposed to maybe having a dinner conversation, maybe saying no to you know, constantly trying to complain about the laundry and the dishes, as opposed to, let's just take 10 minutes to get it done and get it done fast. I train my daughters to time themselves when they clean the counter. And we need to make sure we have a 3-step process, and it needs to be done well, because one day you will suffer if you don't do that. There's not enough training in how to actually take care of our environment at home. And I think we're suffering for it. So now we're entering into this marriage, and everybody's like, well, you do it and I'm not doing it. And the fight is really because nobody wants to do it because nobody knows how to do it.
Arguments, fights in regards to this. And this is not to say that women are not going through it or haven't been through it, because I think they are. I think that they're dealing themselves with splitting themselves from working to possibly being a mom. And a lot of women might have difficulty with letting go completely of household tasks in the way that they want it to be done, because they're also working. And so they're trying to split the workload, and men are trying to step in and do those things, but there can be difficulty, right? And the one that
And I think the difficulty comes from lack of communication skills or lack of order skills. Like, you want to do it done this way or this way. Well, there is kind of a right way to fold a shirt. Now, can we compromise and maybe a shirt could be folded not so perfectly? Sure. But I think we become petty about it because we are, I think it's a root of unfulfillment in other areas in our life, but also it could be that we have found a spouse or partner that we're not in harmony with. I think it's important for us to train young men and women how to find the right person for them. They need to have a lot of things in common. And if you are a person who likes order and you don't have a husband who agrees with the same thing, there will be challenges. I think those standards need to be set. But I do also think that order should be something that we all should be training at home. Now, it's not perfection, it's order. Like when you go to the military, you fold things the right way. Now, I'm not suggesting that our homes need to be like military, but I do think it needs to be like boot camp at some degree. Formation and training on some of the basic life skills are crucial, because how you do a dishes, I tell my children, is going to be reflective in how you also work someday. And your boss will either fire you for what you do or maybe promote you. right? We have to build on these skills. It doesn't just happen overnight. So we have people that are working in the workforce that feel so incompetent, and what, they feel overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, this new job, and oh, it's so stressful. Well, because we have not incrementally learned the necessary skill, whether it's managing our mind, managing our emotion, recalibrating, pivoting, finding solution. And so we feel like we're in this new job and we're like, ah, now it's normal to feel overwhelmed when you going through something new, but we shouldn't feel defeated. We should, as men and women, understand I'm in transition, which means I am in the state of learning, which requires a lot more of me mentally, emotionally, physically, but it doesn't mean I am defeated or a victim of it. It just means I'm in transition, right? That's a skill.
That comes to mind is like when a man is trying to do the laundry, fold towels, but then he gets told that he didn't do it right. He didn't fold the laundry correctly. Like, we got to remember that there's been this change in gender roles, and that the woman inside the house is not the ruler of how household tasks are going to be achieved. So there has to be compromise. But I think that men are having a difficult time, really, because they're running into that resistance from women to just kind of let a man do things in the way that he wants things to be done in the household as well, if things are truly 50-50.
Well, things are not truly 50-50, right? And that's a lie that we've been sold. Sometimes it's 30-70. Sometimes it's just not 50-50. And if we're walking into that mentality that we've been sold that it's going to be 50-50, we're going to walking into failure and frustration, because it's just not going to be the case. And part of it is that the foundation, fundamental, I would say, crisis or root cause is that our culture is void of the gift of sacrifice. We maybe last 100 years, pre-feminism, have sacrificed so much that we're just resistant to anything that I think it causes us pain. But the reality is that in sacrifice is discipline. In sacrifice is the opportunity for us to actually come together. So when we have a culture that is, views sacrifice as a plague, it's always going to be hard. You're not going to have harmony, because you can't achieve the peace, the joy, the harmony, and the life that you want without suffering and sacrifice. And I think we need to reintroduce, discipline as a form of suffering in a way that gives us greater freedom. And I think that's kind of what's happening here is nobody wants to do the hard stuff. And it's, we're bickering because we're undertrained and nobody wants to do the hard stuff. And our deep desire to actually want to be so fully alive in a marriage, so in love, and a family that's peaceful, and find passion, work that we love, and have great quality friendship is something that's seen as sort of perfection. I think that's a false belief that it's about perfection. No, it's about feeling alive in every arena of our life, which is what we teach in the woman's school. Is that it's not about having it all; it's about being fully alive in every part of our life. And we are living in a culture where we're told only parts of us matter, right? And we walk into marriage and we've got our guards up. We're like, oh, when a guy tells me that I belong in the kitchen, no way, Jose, as opposed to the humility, the reverence of saying, I can serve you. It doesn't take away from who I am. As a matter of fact, it it makes me more competent and confident as a woman. Now, doesn't mean that's the only place I belong. The idea of this feminist movement has always been either or. And what I am saying is that there's a new woman that's rising from these ashes, and she's a both and woman. She's got a beautiful marriage. She's organized. She's happy. She has help. She knows how to ask for help. She works hard, but she's not afraid to hold her husband accountable. She's willing to compromise. She knows how to speak so she can be heard. This kind of new woman requires deep training, but I think we are ready for it, because all these nonsense going back and forth, this woman, it's not leading us somewhere. And what we need is training.
And then you also have to be comfortable talking about every little detail of who's going to do what. And there shouldn't be this expectation right now. I think this happens quite frequently where men are expected to do half of the inside tasks because, both people work. And I think that's very valid. But for some reason, you don't really hear very often about like the outside work being split, like the mowing. And
Okay. So I think we're just having the wrong conversation. And what we need more of are role models of a beautiful marriage that is thriving, with a family life that's peaceful and joyful, with a woman who feels like she is free to communicate her potential and is fulfilling who she can be to the world. And there is harmony and collaboration. And I think we need new role models of a beautiful marriage of both men and women that are training hard to invest in their own growth, that are disciplining, that are learning communication skills together. And I think this requires us to be lifelong students of ourselves, our spouse, our children, our community, women who we are. And this idea that we kind of let ourselves go because now we're married or we're a mom is a lie. I'm a mom of 8, and I'll tell you, if I don't study, then I will start to feel insecure about my capacity to contribute who I am called and created to be for this world. So if you're a woman out there and you're single and you want to have a beautiful marriage one day, I'll tell you, you can. I'll tell you that I was that woman who felt like there was no hope in my life. I didn't date anybody for almost 10 years until I met my spouse, Ryan. I had to work on me. I had to invest in who I needed to become. I needed to learn to love myself, because it's the only way to love your neighbor, aka your spouse, your family, is actually if you learn how to love yourself, right? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Nobody talks about self love. And the idea of self love in our culture is really about fluff love. Me, 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 me. No, love is a gift of self, but you cannot give yourself if you haven't formed yourself, if you haven't invested in who you are, if you can't love something you do not know. So women today need to do a better job studying who they are. A lot of internet bickering, talking, like all that time should be done in study, in quiet reverence of your femininity, on studying men, studying the beauty of men. And what we have in our school is that, we have this part in our brain called a reticular activating system, RAS, that God designed, right? That helps us actually expand what we focus on. So if I'm, looking for a white Honda Accord, all of a sudden I start to see the white Honda Accord. That's our brain actually helping us, creating a filtering mechanism. So if I'm saying that there's no good men out there, guess what I'm going to find? Not so good men. But if I focus on, and I use my reticular activating system and say, what is a good man? And how do I find a good man? And this is what I'm looking for. You're going to find it, right? But I will say too that it might take a little bit of time, because men and women today are undertrained. And we need to stop shaming each other and stop talking about what somebody's not doing and why men are this and what's happening in TikTok, and say, listen, let's just start training women how to be women and men how to be men, and go back to the most foundational basic discipline, how to be a woman. And for you women out there that's listening, I believe that there is a new call for this new kind of woman today. And I think we need to jump on board in this new woman that's actually going to usher a new kind of feminism, one that understands her freedom and her responsibility, one that is willing to work hard on herself because she can invest more in the people that she loves. One that's not afraid to be humble. And this idea of boss baby, me, 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 all about me. No, she's reverent. She is grace. She is revered by the people around her. Why? Because she reveres everyone around her. She inspires everybody around her, that she can own who she is as a woman and not be afraid to fulfill her potential, but also can usher a man's potential. She's not afraid of a man's strength because she knows her strength as a woman. Now, how do you become this woman? You pray, but really you train. You do both. You have to train. Athletes don't become athletes just by thinking about being athletes. Yes, you can affirm yourself, but that's only part of it. You have to train yourself. It's like this affirmation without discipline and training does not lead us anywhere. It really is about mastery of self. And here's the last thing I want to say: we are a masterpiece as women. Imagine a beautiful art. What the purpose of art is. Think about something that you believe is a masterpiece. Maybe it's a piece of painting. Maybe it's a Mona Lisa. Maybe it's a piece of, I want to say, an architecture. What art does is that it bypasses logic and it enters into your senses and you experience it viscerally. That's what beauty does. It's what, it literally penetrates your heart. And so here's a question for you: is this new woman ready to be an art, to live her life an art, like the art of being a woman? Isn't it that we can live our life such as a masterpiece, that we can inspire those around us? Because that's what beauty does. Beauty is not this one dimensional physical figure that we have been conditioned to believe. No, beauty is unquantifiable. It is an experience that inspires you and changes you forever. And that is what a beautiful woman is capable of. And it is available to you. But like all things beautiful, it requires self mastery. Because if you think about the most beautiful artistry that takes your breath away, imagine the artist and the mastery necessary to to create a Picasso, to create the Sistine Chapel, a beautiful sunset. Our lives can be a masterpiece. And if we live being a woman as an art, not so that we can be full of ourselves, but so that we can give more of ourselves by inspiring those around us, that's the real question of today. That's the new woman that the world needs now. And all this garbage of talking about back and forth is not worthy of our time and energy anymore. We need to do more time training ourselves to become the woman we are created to be, honoring men, knowing how to effectively communicate, and designing every arena of her life so that we're not constantly reacting to the ways of the world. We need to be masterful. It is about self mastery to the art of being a woman. My name is January Donovan. If you like this video, follow us for more training on how to be a woman and also learn a new woman that is able to inspire the world to be better. Share this video and thank you all. Leave some comments and I'd love to know your thoughts.